Welcome to Writer Talks. I'm Elizabeth Ann Atkins, and I interview the winners of the short story contests here at Two Sisters Writing and Publishing, and you get to meet our authors who are published in our annual international anthology of short story writers. With me tonight is this wonderfully talented man, Michael Colonnese. He has a PhD in American literature. He's a retired university professor after 35 years in the classroom. He is a poet, he is a novelist, and he is a wordsmith. We get to enjoy his poetry tonight, and I'm super excited to have you here tonight, Michael. Welcome to Writer Talks.
Oh, it's so great to be here, Elizabeth. Thank you.
And you're welcome, and congratulations on retiring. How do you feel?
Oh, well, it's so recent, just a few days that I've had off that I haven't gotten used to being retired yet. It feels like, well, tomorrow I'll just do something else. But it's great. It's great. Not to have to prepare for next semester is great.
And you get to enjoy the majestic glory of the North Carolina mountains. It sounds like the perfect place for a writer. What are you working on right now?
Well, I'm always working on 3 or 4 things simultaneously. So I recently finished a sort of academic novel set in a college campus, which is actually a murder mystery called Terminal Degree. Today, working on a collection of short stories, most of which have already been published, but I was working on those. That's a collection called On the Shores of the Dead Sea. It's somewhat, there's a lot of memoir in that, masquerading as short stories. I've also got a poetry collection, which I've been working on, a new one called Beauty as a Secondary Consideration. So all these sort of happen depending on what I'm feeling like when I wake up in the morning.
I try to do
my best.
I love that.
Work every day on something.
So tell me.
Don't retire.
I love that. That's one of my favorite sayings. Writers don't retire. It's just what we do. I love that. Can you talk about that? What does that mean?
Well, that means that you're continually evolving and you're continually working. And I do see it as work. I see it as necessary work. I can't imagine not doing it. It's sort of something that helps forge identity. I identify as a writer first. Everything else is just my day gig.
Even though you were teaching creative writing.
I enjoyed teaching creative writing. I had some wonderful students over the years. It's not the same. It's not the same energy. Sometimes it feeds, and sometimes it takes away energy from you. So I'm ready to move on to something else. I'm ready to put that part of my life behind me.
I love it.
And I've always been one who's able to move on. And I've done a lot of things in my life. Before I was a university professor, I worked as a chemical salesman, as a Pinkerton guard, as a organic farmer, truck driver.
Wow. So Catherine and I always call any job that's not related to writing paid research, because you're getting paid. It's your day job, right? And you're making a living with it. But you're getting to meet all kinds of people and have all kinds of wild experiences that are all fodder for writing. Do you feel that way?
I think that's true. I very much feel that way. I'm not sure I saw it quite that way when I was younger. I was just looking for the next thing. Between the ages of 16 and 30, when I finally decided that the university was the only counterculture left, I must have had 30 different jobs. So I worked as a sound man for a documentary film company. I Uh, I worked as a real estate agent. I had all kind of bizarre careers that lasted 30 days or 6 months or I moved on to the next thing. I got a job. I got licensed to sell life insurance.
Oh my gosh. But guess what? Now you can write characters and scenes with and plots with all that information that you gathered in real life. So that's awesome.
It is. And I now consider that valuable background material that
Yeah.
doesn't require necessary research. I can just
Right.
remember.
I love that. I love that. So you have two winning short stories that appear in our anthologies. One of them is Ambition, and the other one is The Clean and Easy Murder, which is a murder mystery. So do you want to read some poetry or some selection of your work to delight us with your words?
Sure. Well, I'll say about. I'll say a few words about both those stories because I think they had
Okay.
interesting genesis. A clean and easy murder happened when I was talking to a friend of mine who is a retired um, detective and also hostage negotiator, who
Oh my
had
gosh.
who actually worked for a time on cold case files, and he told me about um, a small firm, or two women actually ran it, who cleaned up murder scenes for a living.
Oh my gosh.
Murder scenes are often ghastly, and the families don't want necessarily to deal with them. And it's nice to have someone on call who will do it for a price.
Oh my gosh.
And just talking to my friend about a cold case where um, uh, that kind of small firm that did cleaning was involved
Oh,
prompted Clean and Easy Murder Story.
I
And
love it.
the other story, Ambition, was sort of an exercise in empathy because I was an absolutely horrendous student in high school, indifferent, sullen, and incommunicado to the point where I was placed in special ed classes with students with all manner of disabilities. Um, and I decided to write a story from the perspective of a teacher who recognizes that uh, this kid is not necessarily um, intellectually handicapped, but nevertheless can't reach him. And that became
Wow.
ambition. Um,
Wow. Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. Wow.
and that, um, if you'd like, before I read a poem, I'll actually read um, a couple
An
of
excerpt
opening
from
characters.
Ambition?
If
Please.
you,
Yes, it's a
sure.
wonderful story. Please do.
Okay. It begins with an epigraph from Julius Caesar. It was the Ides of March competition that
Yes.
I won there.
Uh-huh.
And the epigraph reads, did this in Caesar seem ambition? When the poor have cried, Caesar hath wept. Ambition should be made of sterner stuff. All right. Ambition. Marty McGrath, Lee Fisher's 10th grade English teacher, was clearly upset when the boy refused to read Julius Caesar aloud in special ed. Instead, Leo sat in the back of McGrath's classroom surrounded by a pile of musty smelling philosophy texts and short story collections, discards from the public library, while the only other three students able to read at all were expected to soldier on with or without Leo's participation. There was Ruby Toomer, a Down syndrome Black girl who liked to listen to Top 40 and play patty cake, whose stepfather had removed her teeth with a pair of pliers to improve the quality of her blowjobs. There was Lucy Fernandez, potentially bilingual and one of the so-called dreamers, but who had to be carefully watched for any signs of emotional stress that might signal the onset of debilitating seizures. And then Leo's best buddy, Tommy Albright, who had a heart defect and webbed fingers. Tommy probably didn't belong in special ed classes either, but was unusually compliant and agreeable. The rest of the special ed students were simply hopeless, slack-jawed, pimply-faced, and indistinguishable in their hopelessness, except that some of them smelled fecal, wore diapers, and sat in wheelchairs. Once Leo had demonstrated that he could already read and write, most of his teachers had decided to leave well enough alone. But when McGrath dared imagine that a student attracted to old books might possibly be interested in Shakespeare, Leo had responded with a vacant stare. It was the boy's deliberate indifference that galled. It was bad enough that his other students were droolers, as nearly everyone in the administration secretly called them. But to have a special ed kid who showed readability but wouldn't perform, well, that rankled. McGrath had tried explaining to Leo that even if he stuck things out for the full 4 years, a special ed certificate wasn't nearly as valuable as a diploma. But the boy seemed determined to quit attending high school as soon as he turned 16, so insisted that it didn't matter where test scores had misplaced him.
Wow.
And those were the opening paragraphs of that.
That is so powerful, and to have experienced that yourself. I absolutely love your verbs like galled and rankled. Those are awesome verbs.
Well, galled is very Shakespearean, so.
I like it. I love verbs so much because you can write your first draft, or maybe you write naturally like that, but then go back and use the better verb to really convey the mood and tone. It's awesome. Wow, that's gripping.
I'm a reviser. Some
Are
authors
you?
are not, but I'm
Yeah.
a reviser. I still start on yellow legal pads with a pen and go on from there.
Really? You handwrite?
I handwrite, and then of course it has to be typed, and then it's edited endlessly, for 6, 7, 8, 10, 12, 25 drafts. But it often takes that long for me to know what I want to say. And the act of writing is an act of discovery. It's an act of discovering who I am and what I really think and feel. And,
wow. Can you talk more about that? It's an act of self-discovery.
There's many different ways to begin to write. A number of years ago, I was at a convention where I was in a room with about 30 other published fiction writers, most of whom were writing crime or action adventure novels. And the question came up, do you outline and draft? And do you know what your story is going to be before you write it? Do you have it in your head? And the room was evenly divided. About half of the writers said, yeah, they couldn't begin until they had the whole plot worked out in their head and they knew how it was going to resolve.
Mm-hmm.
And the other half said they would never pick up pen if they already knew the ending because it was too much work to do the writing.
Oh
and
my
what made
gosh.
writing worthwhile was to not know, to go blind into that darkness and find out who you were and what you thought in the process of writing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was certainly in camp. Right.
Do you journal?
I have tried. At different times, I have journaled. What I find when I look at my own old journals is how consistent my issues are.
That's hilarious.
Same old, same old. You know, picking up. So I have journaled, and I have journaled for long
Uh-huh.
periods. But when I pick them up,
Uh,
uh, uh, it's really a matter of time. If I had unlimited time, I'd probably journal every day. But sometimes
uh-huh.
it's a matter of, do I journal or do I write? And if I have to,
Oh,
I write. Uh,
wow. Do you write every day?
I try, and I'm
Uh-huh.
always writing, even if even even if nothing ultimately comes of it. I try. I
Uh-huh.
try to get something down the page,
Uh-huh.
and I throw it out. I mean, there's been days when I struggled with a single sentence for 6 hours, and then there's
Really?
been when 30 or 40 pages came as if dictated by the muses.
Isn't that the best? Oh, I love that. Awesome.
That, that's great. Yeah.
It's like you don't want to get up and go to the bathroom. You don't want to eat. You just want to. That's the best.
But it wouldn't happen, I don't think, unless I spent also that 6 hour a day struggling to get the single sentence right.
I love
And sometimes
it.
I found lately that many of those and it's often indistinguishable when you finish a book, what what came so easily and what you struggled with. You can't
Uh-huh.
tell, no one can tell. Like, you might remember, but
Uh-huh.
as you work, when you're working on a book, you always end up working on whatever's in the book over the range of your entire personality. Um,
Mm.
a poem you might do in a sitting. It may
Uh-huh.
take, but a novel or even a collection of stories, you're going to look at those in every mood imaginable, and you're going
Mm.
to change as a person over the time period it takes to actually write and edit and complete a book and publish a book.
Oh, wow. That's beautiful. So, can you talk about how you feel when you're writing? Like, is it frustrating? Do you love it? Do you lose all track of time? Do you look up at the sunset? How do you feel when you're writing?
Um, Try not to look up at the sunset because I'll get distracted. I try to stare at the screen. Sometimes it's an act of joy. Uh, Sometimes it feels as if you're suffering too much for the consequence of these few words that you think are somehow important. Uh, so it depends. It depends. It's always better to have written than to write. You know, Joseph Conrad
It,
was said, "It's not the work; it's what the work contains." Uh, and I like,
oh, uh-huh.
yeah.
So tell me, how young were you when you first started writing and why?
Ooh. Um, well, probably 17, 16 or 17.
Uh-huh.
And um, not that it was any good, but yeah, I wanted to be a writer that
Oh,
early.
you did?
Uh,
Okay.
and I remember when I actually made it to, I went to community college at first and then to the university to complete a degree in English as an undergrad. And I remember my first creative writing teacher asked me, why do you want to be a writer? And I thought up for a moment and I said, because nothing else is worth it. Uh,
Ooh,
uh,
that should be on the wall. Oh my gosh. Nothing else
uh,
is worth it.
uh,
Woo!
which he said, good answer, and moved on. Right. But
What did that
I
mean to
remember
you
that.
though? Like, what did that mean when you said
Uh,
you wanted to be a writer, nothing else is worth it? Did you want to be rich and famous? Did you just want to be recognized? Did you want to be like one of the classic celebrated authors that you'd read in school?
oh, that would have been great, but that wasn't what I meant at all. I think I really meant that I found the act of self expression the only human activity worth uh, the pain and sorrow and strife involved in living. If I weren't some sort of artist, I'm not sure that I would find the flame worth the candle.
Oh, okay, wait. Mic drop, okay? What? That is so powerful. Because writing is something that we do whether we're getting paid or not, whether we're sleepy or not, whether we just it's just what we do. It's like sustenance. And what you just said is so powerful. It's a calling. And it doesn't matter if anybody ever reads, we want people to read our work, of course, but the
Yeah.
act of it is so like such a beautiful release and celebration of self. And the discovery part is really profound. But your discovery is through creating stories, whereas for me, the discovery is journaling, like going within and asking questions and such. So that's really interesting to hear you say that. Now, do you have a scheduled, like, do you always write from 6 to 7 a.m. or only at
Oh,
night or?
I wish. I wish. We'll see now that I'm retired and
Uh-huh,
fewer demands on my time. I don't have
uh-huh.
office hours or classes that I have to meet.
Mhm,
It will be interesting to see if my schedule normalizes in that way.
mhm, mhm,
That's enough to go to the desk the same time every day.
mhm.
Um, but it's seldom in my life that I've been able to have that kind of freedom where every day at the same time. I'm also not a morning person. I probably could do that if I were a morning person, but I am not a morning person. It takes
Mhm.
me a good 3 hours to come out of the cocoon with and a whole pot of coffee, and then I'm
Oh,
okay.
okay. Uh-huh. So do you write
But
at night?
if I had my druthers, I'd like to write in the middle of the afternoon when I've woken up and I've had lunch, and I'd love to work from like 12 to 4 or something like that.
Mhm. So
And
what's
and I was
mhm.
better writing at night when I was younger. Now I'm sort of a couch potato after about 8 o'clock. So
Oh,
that's
okay. So
that.
what's your goal now? Like, do you have a writing goal now that you're retired, like finish a novel or write a screenplay?
You know, I've never done a screenplay. I did commercials years and years ago, which were as hard as writing poems because of the
Uh-huh.
time limit,
Mhm.
stuff like that. But I would, um, I will certainly finish uh, and publish the novels that I have in manuscript already finished,
Mhm.
and short stories are almost done. The collection, the poetry goes on, and I'll write new short stories. I'll probably write a new novel as soon as something strikes me. I actually have another novel about 90 pages or so into it, a new
Uh-huh.
one.
Oh, I love it. That's awesome. That's exciting.
So
So did you want to read some poetry?
sure, I'll
Okay.
read a poem. This is actually, since it's winter time, and we've just come off we're slowly coming out of the COVID epidemic now that we have a vaccine. Thank you, thank you. I'll read a poem called Snow Day.
Okay.
Uh, all morning, I've been staring blankly at a snow-shrouded college campus and hunting for evidence of students or salvation, but finding only absence, which isn't necessarily a failure to grasp at grace. Nor should the icicles on overhangs be psychoanalyzed into daggers of intellectual snobbery, for to touch one's tongue to the metal flagpole in such weather is to honestly encounter the perverse reluctance of the divine. And here, the Carolinas, where even the threat of morning flurries can cancel tomorrow's classes, blame isn't easy to affix. I've lived deep in Dixie for nearly 30 years, and I'm still vague about sin and snow days. And I'm often the only oblivious professor who gets up early and drives to campus when classes have already been nixed and where I've been wondering again in my office this morning about the lost colony at Roanoke, which simply disappeared that first brutal winter. I imagine a young man in thin pantaloons stumbling about, clutching an empty blunderbuss against a frozen coastal wilderness, as if the weapon he held closest would be the thing that saved him.
Mm. Wow. That's powerful. Oh my gosh. It brings to mind, you're from Connecticut, so clearly you had winter, like real winter
Yeah.
in Connecticut. And so people in the South react differently to snow. And it reminds me, being from Michigan, my friends in California tell me, if it's raining, it's just such a big deal. And so it's so interesting how we in the snow states, we get this hardened sort of fierceness when it comes to braving the elements, and yet other people are so squeamish about it. It's funny.
One
And
of
your
the things
poem
about
is
that poem actually had its origins in a day when I woke up and it was snowing and I didn't think anything of it. And I drove to campus only to find that classes had been canceled, that no one
oh
was around, and
yeah.
only my sort of northern mentality. It's like
Hmm.
half an inch of snow, you can't
Yeah.
cancel that. But they had.
Wow. Wow. That's fast.
Yeah,
That was beautiful. Really, like Roanoke, bringing that into it was a whole nother element.
right. Well,
Fascinating.
the poet Richard Hugo, uh, once talked about the triggering town. What you cannot stay on the trigger of the poem. The poem has to evolve. The poem has to move. If you stay where it begins, um, the poem becomes stagnant and dies on the page. But if the poem moves away from the trigger, um, uh, there's space. There's new air you can breathe, and that's good.
Wow, that's beautiful. I love that. Bringing the poem to life. That is so beautiful. So, Michael, do you have any pet peeves about writing?
Hmm. Pet peeves. Um, no, except that I'm a voracious reader, but there's certain kinds of writing that I can't read romance novels. Basically, even I don't generally read science fiction simply because the world is so rich that uh, it keeps me busy as it is. I don't have to
Uh-huh.
imagine anything crazier
Hmm.
than the world as it is, or more
Hmm.
complicated,
I love it.
or anything as simple as uh, boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy
Right.
finds girl. Just
Well,
the genres. So those are pet peeves, I suppose. I
I love
probably
it.
wouldn't go right.
Yeah. Well, as a true writer at heart and as a retired university professor in creative writing, what is your advice to all the writers out there who are trying to follow their dream and their passion of being a writer?
Stick to it. Stick to it. Um, Nothing else is worth it. So you might as well do this.
I
Uh,
love that so much.
um, and I believe this may be naive, but I ultimately believe that writing is a meritocracy. It's one of
Mm.
the few meritocracies. If your writing is good, you will ultimately find an audience. You may not make a lot of money, but somebody will read it and like it, and
Mm.
that has to be enough. Uh,
Oh, wow. Beautifully said. Wow. So,
um,
besides the twosisterswriting.com website, where two of your stories are published under our winning writers pages, where can people find your work? And would you like, if anybody wants to connect with you, where can they find you?
Sure. Well, they can find my novel on Amazon, Amazon.com. It's called my mystery novel, which is called Sex and Death, I suppose. Sex and Death, I suppose. And it's a very hard-boiled murder mystery, right?
Okay.
Sort
Okay.
of, and I believe my poetry collection double feature, which was was published. Both of those were prize-winning books. I won a novel contest for the mystery novel, and the Writers in Books poetry contest. Got my poetry collection published, and before that, the Ledge magazine.
Uh-huh.
I think that's available, and that's still in print.
Wow.
And a short collection called Temporary Agency is still in print. I think they're all on Amazon.
Okay.
And although I don't want to plug Amazon, they do sell a lot of books, which is a good thing.
Oh, absolutely. And do you have an author page where everything is together? So if people go to the Michael
Not
Colonnese.
and I really should. My publisher told me I needed an author page, and I never got to it. Again, it was a choice of how much time I wanted to spend on media and how much time I wanted to spend writing.
I hear
And
you.
when
Yes.
I make choices, I always chose the words. Yeah, I'm certainly not anti-technology. Here we are doing a Zoom thing, but
Right.
um, everything worth doing involves a time investment. And
Yes.
so I don't have. It's
Yes. Yes.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
why I haven't done the dishes yet today, because if I have to choose between writing and doing chores, I'll do those later when I'm tired, but I have to use my maximum brain energy for writing. I love
I certainly.
everything so powerful what you're saying. Do you have any last words for our viewers tonight, Michael, about writing and contests and just creating, living the writer's life?
The writer's life is a life of busyness, of dedication, and an appreciation of chaos, I think. Because uh, uh, you may be joyous at times, you may be sorrowful at times, but you'll always be filled. And to be fully human, that's what be a writer.
Oh, oh my gosh, that is so beautiful. I can't wait to watch the replay of this so I can hear you say all that stuff again. That was beautiful, so uplifting. Michael Colonnese, thank you for sharing your brilliant perspective as a writer, award-winning novelist, poet, retired university professor, PhD in American literature, creative writing instructor, and tremendous inspiration to us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. And thank you, all of you, for watching us tonight on Writer Talks, where you got to hear from Michael Colonnese, PhD, talking about his short stories, his poetry, his novel, and his writer's life and perspective on the world and the writer's gift. Thank you all. And if you're finding value in this program, please do like, share, subscribe, comment, and we will see you in the next episode of Writer Talks. Meanwhile, happy reading and happy writing.